23 of February 2023 and 23 February 23 to 2023. I have something with numbers. I apologize for the background. I'm in the middle of renovations with about 14 dogs around, so kind of messy, shifting shit around, but that's not important. I was talking a week or two ago about the situation Moldova Transnistrië and how this can become a new hotspot, and given the recent events of this B9, I want to point out some inconsistencies. First off, let me get to the other screen. We are talking about this region. For those who are not familiar with the map, this is Moldavia. Here's Romania. Here is Ukraine. And this little strip here is Transnistrië. Now here we have our friend Klaus Johannes in Romania telling that Moldova needs the support of allies in the context of the war in the region. The head of state also stated that Romania plays a very important role in supporting our neighbors. He's saying that Romania and Romanians play a very important role. Let's assure them, the Moldavians, that we are with them, not only with words, but also with deeds, with energy, money, fuel, consulting and many other things. I want to emphasize that we are with Moldavia. Romania is not only ready, it is willing to support Moldova in any scenario. How this support will look depends on the evolution of the geopolitical period. At the moment, we support them with electricity, gas. We help them reform the institutions, but I personally am willing to go further if the situation requires it, said the president. Oh really? Then explain to me the following article as well, right? Let me get to that. 1 second. Hundreds of requests to obtain Romanian bulletins, that's passports, cancelled. Security dangers for the Republic of Moldova, and this was 2 hours ago. Well, if that is not contradicting Klaus Johannes, so you have many Moldavans who want to have a Romanian passport. Most of the Moldavians, they are Romanians, ethnic Romanians, and during the Cold War, ever since Moldova and Transnistrië, they are kind of locked in this geopolitical game. The importance for me to this is because I live in the moment in Romania, and if this war spills over into Transnistria, then yes, where I am living will become more dangerous. So I keep a close eye out on this situation. But back then, 2022, when the Russian military operation started, the Ukrainians, they tried to stir up right away in March and in April a conflict around Transnistria. They claimed that the Russians wanted to invade from Transnistria into the Ukraine, and the Ukrainians, Kiev, they asked Moldova if Moldova was okay with the Ukrainians moving into Transnistria. especially to get a certain weapons depot. Let me find that for you and switch. Kobashna ammunition depot. The Kobashna ammunition depot is a large ammunition depot located in the village of Kobashna, legally and internationally recognized as part of Moldova as a whole. The unrecognized breakaway state of Transnistria controls the village and the ammunition depot and has denied access to international observers, an exception being the so-called peacekeeping military force of Russia located in the region ever since the end of the Transnistrian War in 1992. It's important to remember here one thing. Those so-called peacekeeping military forces of Russia, they are indeed there to guard this largest ammunition depot in Europe. And they have even said that if that would be blown up, it would be the equivalent to the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Huge part of Moldova would be blown up, and a huge part, of course, in the Ukraine as well. So yes, it's very, very important. But it's also important to remind yourself that in 2022 there have been reports, many reports, about the ammunition problem for the Ukrainians and how they would like to get their hands on that old ammunition depot to supply themselves. Again, in this moment, with all the tensions going around and Europe struggling to arm itself with ammunition, to supply the Ukraine of ammunition, it again becomes a question. It might not be on the forefront, but I guarantee you it becomes a question. However, a lot of that ammunition has expired their date. So old ammunition, as we all know, I don't know about you, but where I came from in Holland, the region that I grew up, has been a hotspot in the Second World War, and there has been a lot of old ammunition that was not exploded. And we as kids, we would go in the forest and surrounding areas and look for old ammunition, which is, by the way, very, very dangerous, because ammunition that is not exploded and has been rusting away back then, it can easily explode in your hands. I know personally a few friends who had quite a scare trying to demontage even small arms ammunition. So yeah, it can go with a real bang and it can kill you. So let alone if you have the largest weapon depot of Europe. We have a report. The authorities of the Republic of Moldavia considered blowing up the runway of the Chisinau airport at the beginning of the war in the Ukraine. This is a report from today. However, back then, when the war started, the Moldovan authorities went out of their way to express their neutrality to the Russians. The same for the pro-Russian district of Transnistria. They went out of their way to tell Kiev that they would stay neutral. It will become a very, very dangerous situation in the moment, because Moscow accuses Kiev of planning to invade Transnistria from the same day, which still is a valid concern, because as you might know, down in the south, right down here, let me Scroll in. Here, this bridge has been blown up recently by a drone. So railway that goes there cannot pass into Odessa. This has been done by the Russians according to the reports, and I can see why. Because right here, down here, around Tulsa, there are many American troops and French troops, and I assume that they were getting ready to enter this region, and the Russians want to avoid that NATO troops can go into here. This is all in preparation for, I am sure, a bigger advance of the Russians near Odessa. I don't think it will start pretty soon. Tomorrow we will have the first anniversary of the Russian military operation in the Ukraine. And I don't think the Russians will immediately push there. There are reports right now that Bakhmut or how they call it in the Russian language, the Bakhmut region, that Bakhmut has fallen. That is pretty sure. I am sure that once the Russians gain control of the middle, the north will push in. They will focus mainly on this region, and they will neutralize everything to the Dnieper, down, right down the Dnieper, and cut the Ukraine in half. It's a natural border. I said a few weeks ago in a video, this is what I would do if I was the Russians. I would control the whole region to the east, northeast and southeast of the Dnieper. That at the very least. And that's why I made these lines. I think that then the zone around this yellow line will be demilitarized. Now, in this chess game around Transnistria, they claim that the Russians, and this was right in March, April last year, they claimed that the Russians failed to move into Transnistria. But that was never their goal. That was never their goal. It would have been, indeed, like the report said, unobtainable. They would not have been able to reinforce that region, because back then the airspace to fly over into Transnistria would have been a real challenge with the air defense of Kiev. The same from the Black Sea. The region around Odessa here, as the reports last year showed, is full of mines, and it would not be viable to enter in there. However, back then they claimed the Russians were so much struggling last year that that's the reason why they could not go on. So let's look on the map back then. This is the official map, liveuamap.com, and as we can see, this was at the start of the Russian invaded Ukraine, the military operation. This was at the start, the hotspots. Let me make it a little bit bigger. This was the start of the whole military operation. Now switch to today. There you go. Does that look like the Russians failed? I don't think so. We had a report, I believe in January, end of January, begin February, that a American warship entered the Black Sea, a missile guided cruise ship, and that's in this region around Romania. Back to this map. You can see that if the troops, the American troops and French troops are around here, that this cruise missile ship of the Americans would be of great strategic importance to support any troop movement into the Ukraine. It's all in preparation for a bigger event. That is for sure. Here we had from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Well, if they would endow for international peace, then they would say to all parties, negotiate for peace instead of arming the Ukraine. They keep claiming that this would have been a major victory if the, and this was, by the way, in September last year. Destabilization in Moldova incited by Russia could prompt Kiev and its allies to deprive Moscow of all its levers for influence there once and for all by purging the self-proclaimed Transnistria Republic of Russia's military presence there. Needless to say, the second we would try that, it will give a very stern military response from the Russians. That is for bloody sure. Likewise, if Crimea gets attacked, Russia said all of Ukraine would burn. I don't agree that that would have been per se with nukes, as some people report. I don't think the Russians are that stupid to nuke with real nuclear weapons the Ukraine. Just think of it as this: the fallout would also make it impossible for the Russians to occupy the rest of the Ukraine, right? It would render that terrain useless to all parties, and besides that, it would most likely also trigger a NATO response in kind. However, never forget that the Russian military doctrine states that even if it is conventional weapons attacking Russian soil, there will be their right to give a nuclear response. Then we have another report here. Back then in 22, Moldova denies Ukrainian claim of Russian troops massing in breakaway region to open new front in war. This was April 2022. Moldova tried to keep the Russians at ease. They tried to again emphasize the fact that they are neutral and that they will not support one way or the other. However, we saw recently with these events in Moldova last year to criminalize reporting anything pro-Russian on the gains on the battlefield or about Ukrainian war crimes, etc. It is criminalized in Moldova the same like it is in Germany now, my Germany. I'm ashamed to say that Germany does this, because the moment you deny free press, you know that you are living in a dictatorship, and Germany has become a dictatorship. Then we have a report, April 25th. Ukraine says targeting of separatist building in Transnistrië was provocation by Russians. And the other side, they say Russian-backed Transnistria claims attack near ammunition depot was launched from Ukraine. Then we have Moldova's separatist Transnistria claims drone scene shot fired near huge ammo depot, April 27th. Don't forget this. That was really the intention of Kiev, to invade Transnistrië. But they didn't get the green light from Moldova. And they knew that if they would do this, if they would have done this on their own, then it would have played into the hands of the Russians, because the Russians would obviously have claimed then propaganda, of course, like all. Same with NATO, same with the Ukraine, same with the EU. The Russians do the same. They have their own propaganda machine as well, which is normal in a war. But it would have been a nightmare for NATO and Europe, because if Kiev invades Transnistria, Russia will be able to show to the world, we have to help those Russian citizens in the Moldova region to protect them, just like the Donbass and Luhansk. So there is a very, very, very dangerous game going on around my region in the moment, and that's why I am trying to figure out as much as possible what's going on. Then we have the battle for Odessa and its railways, back then a report. Also from April 2022. All these reports back then have not been really picked up a lot by other reporters, and it's time they should. It's time that Romanians pay attention, because what Klaus Iohannis with this B9 meeting states is for Romanians very dangerous. And besides that, let me ask you, Romania, let me ask you, that promise Klaus Iohannis made, you are already suffering from all the sanctions, Romania. You are suffering from all the sanctions on Russia. You are. So the economy of Romania has went down. The amount of money people can spend on food or medicines or electricity or energy in general has really dramatically decreased. People are suffering here in Romania, yet here is Klaus Iohannis telling that they will give Moldova, that is even more broke, the full support. How, Klaus Iohannis? How you gonna do this? How? Without taking that money from the Romanian Republic? How? How are you gonna do this without taking the money from your Romanian citizens? You cannot. You cannot. The best answer for Romania to the US is to be neutral. That's the safest bet. That is the safest bet. We have the Council of Europe designates Transnistria a Russian occupied territory. That happened in March 16. Before, it was a territory under effective control of the Russian Federation. So this was already a clear escalation on this part of Moldova and Europe towards Russia. While all this saber rattling was going on in that period. Now here is a few questions on Quora. Now that Russia's army has been losing ground on the Eastern Front, and there is no exact date here, unfortunately, but I assume this was also 2022. Now that Russia's army has been losing ground on the Eastern Front, let's look quickly back on this map. Does that look like they lost ground from the start of the conflict? Does that look like they lost ground? No, they did not. So now that Russia's army been losing ground on the Eastern Front, should Ukraine ask permission from Moldova to attack the Russian forces stationed in Transnistria and gain control of Kobashna ammunition depot. As I say, it is the wet dream of Kiev to have that ammunition, regardless if it is still dangerous or not. There might be a lot of stockpile there that is still usable, and it is, don't forget, Russian ammunition that the Ukrainian army indeed can use, because they had the same kind of pre-era Russian military equipment, right? Then we have here, and I really had to laugh when I saw this one, because this is from 20 February of this year. This idiot general Ben Hodges on Russian plans Moldova would be a much easier prey. He claims, let's see, let me see, where was it? And then he claims that the Russians would like to take it, and he says here, another way of course would be an airborne operation, and I think that the planes that would bring the soldiers would be shot down by the Ukrainian air defenses. I agree, they most likely will not go there by air. So it seems to me as infeasible as possible, because I have not found that Russia would have the ability to do such a joint operation. They have been trying to conquer Bakhmut for 6 months and they have not succeeded. So it seems to me that an operation launched on Moldova would be an unimaginable feat. So he also states, at the same time the former general said that the current war began long before 2022. Actually, the war started in the year 2014. Yeah, finally some truth. It started in 2014, but if we look back on that map, how they gained now terrain, and if we then see the reports that Bakhmut has fallen, or at least the city center of Bakhmut is taken, then clearly this Ben Hodges, he is delusional by making a claim today that the Russians have no gains and that they are not able to do this. My prediction again, I go back to my map that I made on the Google map, Google Earth. My prediction is that the following will happen. The Russians, they will get this Odessa Oblast, and I predict that they will offer Moldova in return for their neutrality this strip under Moldova. That's my prediction. I think in the future peace talks that Moldova will quickly realize that doing business with the Russians is better for them than doing business with Romania or the EU. Because what is Romania gonna offer? What? They even refuse now to give the Moldavans a bulletin, a Romanian bulletin, to come en masse into Romania. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, Klaus Johannes, it's nice to give lip service and say that whatever it takes you will help Moldavia, yet you will not give them passports to cross into Romania legally. And besides that fact, just think about it. 30 years. 30 years they could have offered Chisinau help. And likewise, vice versa. 30 years Chisinau could have plead for a reunification with Romania. The same, the EU, Europe, NATO, you never wanted Chisinau to become part of Romania. All those powers to be have kept Chisinau hostage, but likewise Transnistria. So, what could be the future outcome? I think that the future outcome will be that once the Russians take that whole zone that I predicted, 1 second, where do I have it? This. Once the Russians are sure that they have this whole region, then yes, you can bet your ass that peace talks and negotiations with Moldova will be on the way. They will offer, most likely, that's what I would do if I was the Russians, they will offer most likely Moldova a neutral status as long as Moldova does not join NATO, and it might even be able to join Europe, and then get this little piece that used to be Romania and Moldova back. I think that will happen. And in exchange, Transnistria, that is mostly pro-Russian, and don't forget, Transnistria also has a lot of ethnic Ukrainians. There is. So my prediction, in the future of Moldova, they will get that strip down to the Black Sea, then they will not be landlocked, they will be able to have trade from the Black Sea, they will not be held hostage then, neither by the EU, NATO, Romania or Russia. In return they will stay neutral and be a like a little buffer zone with unlike now, better economic prospect if they would agree to give up this little strip of Transnistria to the Odessa Oblast. Then this little river here will be also again a little border, right here. Then this part would go to Odessa and this lower part would go to Moldavia. I think that will be the future outcome for Moldova, but I don't think it will join Romania. I don't think this is serious talk from Romania. I think it is only to ensure the pro-EU Moldova, the part that is pro-EU, that they have some future economic prospect, of which I think will never happen. And by the way, there was also another interesting part. 1 second, let me find it. I had a lot of tabs open about this. There is a report from Newsmaker MD, a detailed report. It's a very long report, but I want to pay attention to this little thing. For the average Moldovan, no Transnistrian conflict simply exists. There is a relatively free movement of people, goods between the parties, and 2.4%, according to the latest barometer of public opinion, only 2.4% of citizens name the Transnistrian conflict as a priority problem requiring urgent solution. For 30 years they have been locked basically in this situation, and in those 30 years at some point the conflict normalized and people crossed borders, there's trade between the borders, free trade. There has been gas and electricity delivery to Moldova from Transnistria, and it has been recently shut down, as I understand. But this is all because of that pro-war rabling settling of this fallen government in Moldova. Keep an eye out on this region. It will become very, very strategic important. Tomorrow is the first anniversary of the military operation And in my opinion, it is time for peace talks. If only we, NATO, would not be so stubborn. If only we, Europe, would not be so stubborn. And if only some more pro-peace leaders would be there in the EU. We will not win this conflict. We will not. We will not win this conflict. It's impossible. And regardless what Biden says today or yesterday about we will not give up 1 inch of NATO territory. What NATO territory? What NATO territory? NATO doesn't have territory. NATO is an organization claimed to be a defense organization against USSR threat. The USSR has been long gone. The Warsaw Pact was set up as an answer to NATO, not vice versa. And the Warsaw Pact has also been dissolved. Putin wanted to join NATO and the West, Europe, and Clinton, Bush, and everyone after denied the Russians to become part of a greater European family. So, in my opinion, if we want to have peace in Europe, you know what we need to do? We need to kick out our internal enemy, the USA. They blew up Nord Stream 2. They keep Europe hostage, not the Russians. The Russians kept supplying even to the Ukraine gas until last May. Zelensky closed that line, not the Russians. The Russians didn't blow up the infrastructure last year as we do with NATO. First we bomb all the infrastructure, water, electricity, etc. We blow it up to force the country that we are engaged with on their knees. We blow up their infrastructure. The Russians didn't do that. The Russians supplied gas to Germany, even when this crazy Scholz, this puppet for the occupying USA regime in Germany. Yes, Germany has been occupied since the Second World War and continues to be occupied to this day. Even then, the Russians kept supplying Europe and Germany of gas. Why? Because they are such bad guys? Now you could make the argument and say this is because they had a weak economy and they needed our money, which obviously is proven now last year and today that they don't need our market, because the other, what is it, overwhelmingly 3/4 of the world gladly takes the Russian gas and oil and raw materials. They gladly buy it from the Russians. We are the losing side, not the Russians. We are. And if we are smart, we, the people of Europe, we hold our leaders accountable for supporting a Nazi fascist regime in Kiev. For 8 years before Russia started the military operation, there was a genocide on ethnic Ukrainian, Russian, Ukrainian people in the Donbass and Lugansk. And we, the so-called heroes, NATO, the so-called Free West, don't make me laugh, we choose to ignore that fact. And we choose to not listen to Mr. Putin. Well, the gloves came off, and if we continue now, if we keep continuing, the gloves will come off even more. And I have no problem to support the Russians if they want to deliver freedom to the rest of Europe. I have no problem to support the Russians to kick out the USA, because the USA is our enemy, not Russia. The USA. And the USA is my enemy. Yes, not the Americans, but this deep state military complex. Really, people, wake the fuck up in Europe and start to revolt. Start to revolt against all those puppets from the USA regime in Europe. Start to revolt against them. America blew up the Nord Stream 2. You want to know how we can provide, we, the citizens, how we can provide an answer to the USA? By simply not buying American goods in Europe. Yes, avoid buying American goods. Don't buy Coca-Cola, don't go to the McDonald's. Avoid to have any money spent on whatever American product. And I guarantee you, if we, the people of Europe, would make a sanction on the USA, they will cave in. They are already caving in because the dollar, the petrodollar, is doomed to sink. And the only thing that we can do in Europe to avoid to drown with that Titanic of the Biden war crime family is to join the BRICS, to leave the SWIFT system and to join the BRICS. That's the only salvation we will have. I wish you all a nice day and think about it, because pretty soon we will be fucked if we don't stand up and revolt against the USA.